Welcome to Enjoy the Wander. I'm Eunjee.
I'm Jun Hee.
I'm Matt.
And welcome to the podcast.
Woo woo.
Wow.
Jesus edition.
This week is a little bit different. We don't have a live guest on here with us.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, I'm in the leader seat.
Yes, he is. He did so good last time. He's going back to back.
Oh, wow. I can't believe y'all trusted me with this again.
Mm-hmm.
But we are really excited to share a conversation that I had with a friend of ours. His name is Nathan Chang. He's one of my close friends from youth group and, we served together in youth, not my youth group
together.
And Matt and Eunjee, you guys don't know.
No, I've only met him once when I was serving in Bible study. And that's it. I don't have too much of an impression of him besides that he seemed to really have a passion for the youth.
Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting going to this just blank and just hearing what he has to say.
Yeah. And this episode is, so this weekend is Easter Sunday and Palm Sunday. It's like Holy Week.
Right. This weekend is
this week
Sunday.
is the start of Holy Week.
Mm-hmm.
And as you all know, one thing that ties us together as part of our identity is our faith.
Yes.
And so we really wanted to have an episode where that was featured. And I think we had a lot of chances to hear kind of our perspective. And so I thought it would be great to bring in, or we thought, not me, this is a team effort. We thought it'd be great to bring in someone and have them share their testimony. And I thought it'd be a great idea to get some live reactions of like, ooh.
Yeah. I'm kind of excited about this setup. I feel like this is the creative side that Wani has from being such a podcast snob all these years. So it's kind of cool to hear a recording of Nathan and hear his story. And then hopefully Matt and I can have some authentic reactions and questions to it.
Yeah. All right. Y'all ready?
Let's get it going.
Okay. All right. Without further ado, here is Nathan Chang. Hi, Nathan.
Hey, Wani.
How's it going?
I mean, it can't be better.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, no problem.
Do you want to take a second and maybe quickly introduce yourself? However you want to take that.
Sure. I mean, I don't know how far you want me to go here. I mean, my name is Nathan Chang. I'm 40 years old, married, 2 kids. One actually just got his license
congratulations.
Today. So, he drove me on. He actually passed me on the road for the first time, and that was so awkward.
Did you say hi? Did you wave to each other?
We waved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. At least you waved.
So, yeah.
I didn't know you were only 40 years old.
Yeah.
Wow. That blows my mind. We're only 11 years apart.
I don't know how to take that. You thought I was older.
Yeah, you just have a mature air about you. What can I say?
I don't.
You do. You carry yourself very maturely. So we're doing an episode that's going to be released on Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday. And we just wanted to get the stories of folks who have a relationship with Christ. And in your case, you didn't grow up as a Christian. You didn't grow up in a Christian home. And so I thought that would just be a really interesting way for our listeners to kind of get to know you and your story. And my first question to you is, where did you grow up? And can you tell me a little bit about your childhood?
Okay. So, I was born in Houston, Texas, right? To I guess, Chinese/Taiwanese citizens that immigrated here. I think, they came here to go to university. We grew up in A-Leaf, which is, as of today, a not so nice part of Houston. You don't, you lock your doors while you drive through there, but, it wasn't that bad when I was younger. Interestingly enough, though, my parents got divorced when I was 5 and my father left when I was 4. So I grew up with a single mom and she worked, a lot. I think, right away after my father left, and let's see, I think it was in 1st grade, my mom had to move us because we couldn't afford the house that we lived in. And we moved around a lot. She had a couple of boyfriends, which is really weird. And I was a very angry and misbehaving child. I mean, we're talking in elementary school, I'd say 3rd grade, I had detention, in-building suspension, lunch detention, and morning detention all at once. And that's in 3rd grade. Yeah, I was pretty angry, I think, at a young age.
Mm.
I think my mom kept moving us into better school districts because she was just kind of worried about how things were shaping up socioeconomically around us. And so I think I finally ended up in the land of sugar. And I went to Clements High School that was 50% Asian and 50% white.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where childhood ended, I guess.
Mm. So you described yourself as angry, right, as a kid.
No, yeah.
Like, what fueled that anger for you?
You know, I when I look back, I was definitely angry at my father. I thought that he had abandoned us. And I was really upset because I didn't have a father. Everybody else had fathers at all the events and, fathers to take them to sporting events, to their sports, I even remember my mom always just speaking ill of my father all the time too, which I think fueled some of that hate. And at the end of the day, I never really got to know him because my mother really forbid us from having a relationship with him. I would only see him once a month to pick up our child support check. He lived in the same city.
Oh, so he was still there. He was still around.
Yeah. But not in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about a specific moment that you can remember from your childhood where you really felt that hole, that gap that he left behind?
Yeah, I think by the time I was in middle school, I was actually like a budding tennis athlete, right? Like I even, started to get pretty highly ranked in state, in super championships. And there were always fathers, in the sidelines cheering for their kids, high-fiving their kids. And I won my first tournament. And that is actually what got me to rank up for the first time. And I remember the kid that I beat, he ranked up too because he's good. You get to the finals, you're pretty good. Next tournament, you'll get there. Yeah. But his dad was there to console him. And that, I think, really, really hurt for some reason. And I didn't understand it back then. Yeah.
How do you think about that moment now?
Well, now it's very, very different because, there's just so much that's been revealed to me over the years about what really happened between my mother and my father. Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that moment? Like what?
I think it was just one day we're having dinner with my aunt at her house. And she just kind of shared like, your dad loves you guys so much. And I was like, really? And she was like, whoa. She could sense, that kind of, that disdain I had in my voice. And she just, said, whoa, hang on a second. Maybe you don't know. And she just started, describing it all. My father fought really hard for custody. And in Texas, you just won't win. So at the end of the day, he was sort of relegated just to being whatever it is that my mother wanted him to be. And he just didn't want to rock the boat. So there was just kind of this heartwarming / tear-filled moment where, we kind of reconciled. And he just shared that, I always really wanted you guys. It all just kind of made sense. Like, why would a father abandon their kids? They probably wouldn't if they had the choice, right? If they didn't feel like the circumstances were just too insurmountable. And we're still trying to repair things. There's just so much time that was lost. But he lives in Sydney, Australia.
Oh, wow.
of all the most
literally across the other side of the world.
The most remote place in all the world.
Yeah.
A prison colony. So he,
interesting.
Yeah, we just don't see each other. But when I was doing a lot of international traveling, every time I went to Australia, I would go and visit him. And then he would come here once a year and he would stay at my house. And it was really a treat because he loved my kids and, my kids loved him. Yeah. And it was, we were just able to really start loving each other, I think, for the first time. Probably more so, I was able to start loving my dad for the first time. And that was in my 30s. Yeah. I want to get back to that later. Okay. I'm gonna hold on to that thought because I feel like there's something deeper there. But I'm curious to kind of see how that timing plays out. But so you and your mom and sister or siblings, just you and your sister, right? Yep.
Okay. Yep. So you all had moved to Sugar Land at that point, and you're in your teenage years. Can you describe for me what those years were like for you?
I think coming from where I came from, like geographically, automatically that you sort of take on this bad boy moniker because I come from like the ghetto. But I was not a good student. My sister went to Northwestern, so I think she did well, right? No. I mean, I remember like even almost failing a semester of geometry. I remember failing a semester of pre-calculus. No, high school was like really terrible for me academically. It was great, I think, in every other way though. Love the social aspect, love sports. Obviously I played tennis the entire time, varsity.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think immediately after my sister left, it was kind of lonely, right? We have this, 4-bedroom house and there's just 2 of us in it. And my mom works probably more than full time. Yeah.
So you're home alone a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I finally got my car that, I had all the freedom to do whatever the heck I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could connect more, spend more time with classmates and things like that.
Yeah.
But that opened up a whole nother can of worms.
What do you mean by can of worms?
I think that there's a lot of there's just a lot of bad things that happened. Looking back, man, I wish if I could go back to my previous self, if I could go back to past Nathan, I would definitely explain how much more he needed Jesus, because there were just so many wounds that I ended up inflicting upon myself when I was 16 through 20s. And it all started when I was 16. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. Everything from, partying, lots of rebellion away from my mother, hurting my mother a lot. I mean, there would be days where I just wouldn't come home. Of course, I had my own job. I could pay for whatever I wanted because I liked working and having money. Skip class. And then, of course, there's, teen sex and even teen pregnancy that ended up hitting us.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of brokenness. And I wish I could go back. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you handle all of that?
Not well.
Yeah.
I think by the time I hit 18, and it's like, I'd say it's my last semester, and I'm sort of freeze a bird as senioritis is sinking in.
Yeah.
I think that's the moment that I realized how terrible of a son I was. That was the moment that I realized how many terrible things that I put my mother through, how many different ways I hurt her, how many different ways I just turned away from her. And of course, all the different people I hurt through all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
That I was able to actually apologize to her and say, I've been pretty terrible.
How did you tell your mom? Like, how did that conversation go?
I think I just started noticing that I didn't care as much about a lot of the things that I cared about, like the way I dressed, chasing after girls, constantly wanting to be away from home and just not be at home because home was depressing. Somehow I just started to realize that all the things that I was trying to run from really didn't matter. If that's the way it feels like right now. Of course, I have a very, very different set of lenses on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you say run away from, I mean, it sounds like you had kind of like that relationship with your dad, but also now this like tumultuous relationship with your mom. Like what were you trying to run away from?
I just wanted to feel like I didn't need anybody else. I just wanted to be completely independent and not have to rely on anybody else. Because I think young Nathan just really didn't want to be vulnerable to being hurt by anybody else.
Why is that?
Because he's been hurt a lot as a young kid, I think. I think broken marriages are like nuclear bombs, and the fallout goes very, very far. Yeah. Yeah. Divorce is not just a legal separation. It is a explosion. Yeah. I can't remember what being loved by two parents that loved each other felt like. I don't really know. I think all I can tell you is that my mother was constantly bitter and very, very paranoid from then on. And that's what I know my mother to still be like.
Space between us. We are worlds apart.
So that's the first portion of his story. But Matt, were you gonna? Yeah, thoughts.
Yeah, it's just crazy how much someone just identifies with what was like done to them and what they were surrounded with. I mean, it just reinforces so much why our greatest commandments are just like to love and to forgive. Honestly, to love, because I think just being around love and feeling love is like the only way to learn how to love and to like seek love. And, you know, for the story where this person has been abandoned essentially over and over by his father, even if it wasn't his father's intent, and by his sister, even if it wasn't his sister's intent, but just that feeling, you know, and it sounds like he just owned that and he decided to abandon everything that was around him because it's just what he was used to and what felt easier probably in the moment. And yeah, it's almost like, how do some people even have a chance early on if all they feel are like negative emotions and they don't feel the things that, you know, we hope to feel and we hope that other people feel? It's just it's a heartbreaking story, but it's also, I think, evident of just how quickly even God maybe was moving in his life without him even realizing it. Just, I mean, in a 2-year span where he sunk into that, you know, even by the age of 18, already stirring in his heart to like speak to his mother and apologize and start feeling that kind of like internal tug to pursue other things and leave that, you know, those kind of dark years behind. I mean, it's pretty impressive how early on I think God was even moving in him to kind of change the course of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just hearing it, my heart just breaks for what Nathan went through, you know, and I'm, you know, this is a story of, I'm excited, I'm hopeful that it's a story of redemption, and I believe it is, knowing who he is in our church. But yeah, just hearing all these experiences really just breaks my heart. And yeah, like Matt said, how does someone stand a chance when there are so many domino effect type things that do happen? And so thanks, Nathan, for sharing even up to here.
Yeah, and I'll be curious to ask you, Wani, because now when I hear the story, I first see it through the lens of like being the father in the story. Yeah. Because I'm a father and that's such a strong part of my identity now. So even before I put myself like in my younger years' shoes and identify with him, I'm actually first identifying with his father and hearing the story from that lens. But I'll be curious kind of what your initial reaction was and how you internalized what he was sharing.
Yeah, I think the moment that really stuck out to me was when he shared just like this last part, you know, and knowing how different our life stories are. I think when I compare what Nathan had to go through and what I was privileged to not have to go through, I think there's just like a huge gap. And I think for me, I was just like, didn't really understand a lot of the times what he was talking about. But when he was just talking about like the nuclear bomb that goes off at the end, that image just stuck with me.
Yeah, like I'm seeing the explosion.
Yeah, and just the ripple effects that it has. And I I think this is something that we're going to go into a little bit later, but knowing, like you said, knowing who he is now, and like I have a personal relationship with Nathan. Yeah. And I'm just amazed, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, in the room when we were talking and he said that, it was just pretty quiet. Very, I just felt like, wow, like, what do you even say to that? You know?
Yeah. I mean, as he's sharing, like for me, I'm envisioning so many students I've had who grew up in parts that, like he said, you drive through and you want to hurry up and pass by, you know, and just like the brokenness at home and the escape you find in the freedom. I don't know, just everything. So I'm still processing, but I'm like really clinging on to the truth of what can happen for him and almost like wanting to claim that, whatever that is for students I've been praying for the past years.
And I think the last thing I would add is one of the other lens I'm viewing the story at is that as a mental health professional, because I've heard this story hundreds of times, but what I'm really excited to hear, because it's hard for people to get out of that. And I'm excited to hear how God was this overreaching avenue to do so, because to me, it's just a reminder of like the power of what God can do, because like, trust me, it's hard for someone to get out of that cycle. And just knowing we have like we have God on our side to overcome that is already like pretty inspiring. So I'm really eager to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to skip forward in his life a little bit. And just to fill in the gaps for y'all, Nathan goes off to a few different schools. He doesn't go to college at first. He goes to UT Provisionals, which I don't know exactly what that is. And then he goes to A&M for a little while, and then he comes back home. And all throughout that, he just has that party lifestyle. I think at this point, he hasn't really met Jesus and anything like that. But while all this is happening, his mom marries another man who is a believer, and she ends up becoming a Christian. She ends up becoming a believer.
Wow.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing to hear as I was listening to his story. And Nathan learns a lot from this man. He's a really great guy, guides him and mentors him. Nathan gets baptized, but like at that point, he doesn't really understand exactly what baptism means, right? His mom just encourages him and pushes him to go through with this. And at this point in his life, when we pick up the story again, he is in his last year in college, and he is about to enter into a new chapter of his life.
Wow. Great summary.
Thank you. Oh, one thing I did forget to mention, the reconciliation that Nathan talked about with his dad, that happened in college. So that happened during the college years. And so to give you some context, to give you some context, pretty much all throughout his childhood, he didn't really have a relationship with his dad up until kind of in the deeper part of his relationship with his dad started in college.
Okay.
And then the reconciliation happened a little bit before that, but that's kind of when everything happened. Yeah.
I met my wife at the age of 20, I think 21.
Yeah.
I was 21. Yeah. I was about to turn 22. And she had just graduated and she was back in Houston. Do you know this story?
No. Well, even if I did, you should tell it. You should tell it anyway.
You do know it though?
Kind of.
Okay.
Hazy. Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Well, she's gonna hate me for this. She's really gonna hate me for this. We met at a bar. It was my buddy's 21st birthday, so you know what those are like. And she was our waitress. I guess she just had just come back and was looking for a job after she graduated. And yeah, I was like, oh, there's a hot chick, chat her up. So anyways, she agreed to have lunch with me the next day. Well, we were talking that night and she had shared that we went to the same middle school together. and that we're the same age, I was like, oh, wow, how do we not know each other? Well, we know some people that are the same. So, that's okay. And so we went on a couple of dates. Somewhere in there, she had a boyfriend. I didn't know that, whatever. that somehow got fixed or didn't. I can't tell you. But we kept dating. And about 3 months in, she's moving. So we're packing some boxes, and I found a yearbook from middle school, 6th grade. And in the yearbook, there was a pink heart around my picture. I hope that picture doesn't surface. But, I wasn't thinking anything. I was just like, people drawing each other's yearbooks, and, maybe one of her friends, thought it was cute, whatever, And then, people sign yearbooks and they leave little messages in the margins, right? And in the cover. And that's when I saw it. They said things like, oh, maybe Nathan will notice you next year. And that's when I was like, you lied. No, don't get me wrong. I'm incredibly flattered, Like, how could you not be really, really flattered? And so, she lied. She knew exactly who I was. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys talk about that moment when you came into the restaurant and she became did she do that on purpose? Do you think?
Which restaurant?
Like the bar that you guys went to.
Yeah, she knew who I was.
Yeah. So she became your waitress on purpose.
Yeah, I think there's no way she didn't know. She's like, what is that?
Yeah.
And so, we never gone into that. I think she's embarrassed enough. Yeah. I was fine with it. And, I remember, I think it was like literally the second week we were dating, she told me she was going to marry me. And that didn't scare me off. Trust me.
That's surprising.
It should have. And we did end up getting married, but not before we got pregnant.
Tell me more.
That was really hard.
Yeah.
That was really hard for a number of different reasons. Obviously, we're not ready. I'm in my last semester, by the way.
And how old are you guys at this point?
22.
Okay, both of you.
Yeah.
22. Yeah.
So I'm in my last semester at UH, just trying to finish up, obviously, as soon as possible so I can go work. And my mother, who's a Christian, and my sister, who's not, to break us up, my sister and my mother shipped me off to China and convinced me to go and spend some time in China so that I could clear my head. But clearly they were trying to split me away from my soon-to-be wife. And it didn't work. I spent a couple of months out there and nope. I want to go home. I want to have a baby. I want to spend the rest of my life with Irene. And that's what I did. Yeah. We came home, had the baby, I think it was like 6 months after that, got married.
And why did your mom and your sister want so desperately to break you guys up?
I don't know. I think that they thought that was going to ruin my life for some reason.
Were you scared at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you handle that?
Clearly I ran away.
Yeah. Do you think you ran away because I think the way that you described it earlier was like, oh, my mom and my sister made me do this, But do you think part of you wanted to run away?
Yeah. I think part of me did. There's just so much shame in what we've done, and even more shame in what I was being asked to do, and what we were being pressured to consider.
How did you think about like what to do about this pregnancy?
I basically left it like a coward with my wife.
Do you think about that time a lot?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever want to go back and think about that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That still fills both of us with a lot of shame and a lot of regret. And I think it definitely reminds my wife of some of the darkest times that she ever lived through. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think as he was sharing that story with me, I felt the weight of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think specifically when he talked about having essentially just leaving Irene on her own.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Was he a believer at this time?
No, he
No.
wasn't.
He got baptized, but not really knowing
Right.
what that really meant.
Right.
And I think that was the extent of,
It just seems like there's so much protection over them
yeah.
already happening. But man, yeah, that's a situation that can really tear you multiple ways at one time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was kind of talking to him about it a little later, and I think it's something that, and he talked about it here too, but something that I think still has a lot of weight on them, you know? And I know each of us carry our own weights in life and the burdens that we put on ourselves. And I think this just seems like one of those really big stones. As he was describing it, it was very heavy.
Have they had conversations with their children about this?
I actually don't know. I know I was asking Ethan, his son,
Mm-hmm.
and telling him, "Hey, your dad's on my podcast,"
Mm-hmm.
and he said, "I'll go listen." And
Because I was like,
oof.
like Steven's been on here, so who knows if youth kids could
Right.
kind of find their way.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing I am curious
Mhm,
about,
mhm.
you know, as a family, if they listen to this story. And
Mm.
Nathan's a pretty open guy.
Yeah.
And they have a really great relationship with Ethan and
Yeah.
Aaron, their two sons. And it's, I don't know, I'm curious though.
Yeah.
As parents, would you all have that conversation?
Well, I was thinking, I mean, separate from that, I was thinking, because you mentioned how much weight it still carries to him and his wife, but imagine the weight on his mother and sister too, that they probably still carry. I don't know if that's going to be talked about later or if that's something you know of, that dynamic now, but yeah, I mean, something like this, I think puts a lasting weight on everyone who is
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah. I talked to him about his marriage over the next few years. And that is something that I think has been really difficult to overcome in that relationship with Irene and her in-laws. And you know, like, what do you do in that
Mhm,
situation?
mhm.
You know, if I was in Nathan's shoes, if I was in Irene's shoes,
Mhm.
I really don't know what I would do.
Yeah, because like what he spoke to, the fact that, you know, family has such a strong influence and it's so hard to sometimes separate that, which is something I'm still like learning how to do. And I feel like, yeah, like you said, like our stories are more privileged in certain ways, you know, and that's still so hard for me to separate sometimes.
Yeah.
Also, Irene, like it sounds really cute, but also it could sound like those like crime stories where like they find and investigate a pink heart over like a anyways, I think it's really cute though. Like that meet is, I don't think it's a meet cute, but the fact that she had a crush on him and then they
Yeah.
ended up together,
It's a
like
pretty
that's
amazing
freaking
story.
adorable.
Yeah. Yeah. First time, I couldn't stop cracking up. So that was the second time I've heard that story. It's just as good the second time.
Like,
Man.
yeah. And the fact that someone wrote that, maybe he'll notice you. That is super cute.
Yeah. That was
Wow.
really cute. So this next portion of his story, we're going to jump to his life as a parent now. And unfortunately, just the nature of podcasts, like we can't, I wish I could pull in all of his story because there's a lot of amazing things that he talked about. To catch you all up on where his life has been at this point, him and Irene got married after having Ethan, but their marriage went through a lot of ups and downs. Obviously, like we talked about the strain that having an early pregnancy, the strain of mother and sister-in-law who suggested running away, like that was a lot of strain in their marriage. And I think because of the way that Nathan had grown up and Irene's parents are also divorced. And so just a lot of brokenness in their own marriage and pain that they haven't probably like worked through on their own that resulted in just a lot of ups and downs in their marriage. And they almost get a divorce actually really early on in their divorce, in their marriage. It was like 6 months in.
Oh.
Yeah. And and I think it for me, it was like a reminder of like, you know, these things happen in cycles, you know, as if you are if you're a child of something like this, like it just plays itself over and over again. But thankfully, they kind of navigate through this period and are able to kind of come out relatively okay on the other side. They go through several periods of marriage counseling. Their second son, Aaron, is born. Him and Ethan are about 5-6 years apart. And when we pick up the story now, they've actually had almost a decade of pretty stable life together.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so they live in Sugar Land. Nathan has worked his way up. He has a pretty steady job, stable family. He loves to ride his bike. Yeah. And
I think that's the Nathan I met.
yeah. The Nathan that you know now is the Nathan that has become where he is at this point in the story. And this is where we pick up.
Ethan, when he was born with this small lump in his right forearm. And, you know, the doctor just said, hey, it's a fluid-filled sac. You know, it'll probably just get reabsorbed. But it never really went away. Around the age of 10, it started to grow. And it probably grew to the size of an egg. And that's when the doctor was like, this is not good. You need to go and have it MRI'd. They take the MRI and they're like, it looks like a tumor. And so they said it has to be biopsied. This is all new for us. We're not in the medical profession. And it luckily comes back benign. But it's actually growing at a very fast rate and it's resting on the nerves for his hand. There's just a matrix of nerves that run through your forearm. So he was actually having some pain and having some like neuropathy in his fingers and things like that. And so, they were going to have to operate. And that was a tough time. Yeah. We've never really had any problems. Like it was like we were on cruise control for 9 years.
Yeah.
I can't even look back and see anything significant for 9 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of my wife's friends from her spin class studio said, hey, why don't you come over to our house? You know, we do this thing called house church. And I'm not somebody that wanted to go to church. I don't need church. We don't need church. We're fine. Why would we need church? So my wife calls me. I called her on my way home on a Friday, and I was like, "Hey, you want me to pick up something for dinner?" She's like, "No, we're going to house church, and they'll feed us." And I was like, "What the heck are you talking about?" Yeah, I have no idea why she would want to go. She never ever expressed any interest in church, and so. I was like, okay. What about the kids? They're going to go too. There's kids there. I was like, what? All right. Where is it? It's just down the street. I was like, okay. All right. I guess we'll go. We'll see what that's going to be like. I walked in and my cousin was there. I knew all the people because my cousin had kids too. And so at the birthday parties, all these people would be there. They've even been to a Christmas dinner with my grandmother and all that kind of stuff. So I've met these people before. So it was very easy to just walk in and just say, hey, what's this? This can't be all bad because I already know all you people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we started going to house church. But the second house church, so during the week between two house churches, we get a phone call that the first surgeon that was going to operate on my son wouldn't do the surgery because it was too complicated. And so they said that the best surgeon was this gentleman in Texas Children's Hospital. Well, he wasn't answering our phone calls. So my wife was really, really worried, like crying a lot, worried. And so we end up at house church and she's crying all about it. And Kat's husband, Kat's my cousin.
Your cousin.
Is a plastic surgeon at TCH, Texas Children's. And, of course, just nonchalantly, he's like, what's the guy's name? And, my wife tells him, and he's like, oh, yeah, that's my colleague. He was like, I specialize in cleft palates and hands. So he was like, that's my colleague. So let me just text him real quick. And so, my wife's sitting there crying and explaining all this stuff. And then he comes back, he's like, yeah, he'll do it. And I was like, what just happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I of course, my wife and I don't understand what happened, but everybody else in the house church understood what happened, if you know what I mean, right? And so I was just like, I didn't have a super emotional response. My wife did, of course. I was just like, oh wow, that's just like the craziest thing. Yeah, but I'll take it.
Yeah, it's like what a coincidence.
Yeah,
like, yeah.
Wonderful coincidence. Yeah. Just everybody else is like, praise God, hallelujah, like God is so good, and I'm just sitting there like, yeah. Well, yeah, you then you fast forward to the surgery, right? And now we're, I don't know, 6 house churches in, something like that. We never stopped going. There's no way my wife is going to not go to house church now. And the doctors are like, it is really complicated. So there's like two main scenarios. One, the nerves run through the tumor, and we have to cut the nerves. And then your son loses the use of his hand for at least 6 months. And we actually have to cut nerves out of his legs that he doesn't need to walk. And then we'll splice them into his arm. And then you'll have to wait for the nerves to grow through the nail housing or matrix. And that's going to take at least 6 months. And of course, my wife's like devastated. And of course, the other scenarios is it goes around the tumor and we just cut the tumor out. It's no big deal, So, of course, everybody's praying for the latter, and we get into surgery, and Eddie's there at every appointment. He even makes sure to be at the surgery. He's there, like, praying for us. And he said he's going to, be in the surgery just to make sure. He doesn't have to do all those things, but he does them. Just really, really calming presence and supportive and encouraging presence. And just pure gift from God in hindsight, obviously. I still didn't know what was happening. God was working. People will tell me God's working, but really?
Yeah.
And Ethan's fine. Pulled the tumor out. Didn't have to cut any nerves. His arm will, feel a little awkward for like a month because, the nerves are stretched, but he'll make a full recovery. And that, I think, that was just an incredible miracle. All of it. And so after that, there was no stopping going to house church after that.
I know, right? It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
I did not expect that to be how, like, the shift, or like the start of the shift. Because there's just so much like brokenness, so many different experiences or incidents in their entire story. But wow, just somebody, that's my colleague.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's also like, it's crazy because he can't remember. He's feeling, or them feeling like it was cruise control for 9 years. And like really just the impact of like the health of their child can just be like huge in comparison. Dang, God was really with them. It's crazy. He's like, like, I didn't know this was what was going on, but like now he can say it knowing now, but then he's still saying like, I didn't know then. And then you talk about, and everyone else like, God is good. And they're just like, okay, whatever. We scored the surgeon. Woohoo. Like that's probably in their mind, but it's like, they're praising, and it's kind of crazy how they can like celebrate that later, what everyone else was celebrating in the moment.
Yeah, it's amazing. I feel like hearing stories like this, it's one of my favorite ways to like bolster my own faith, but I think even to share faith with others is sharing these events that are like impossible outside of either a ridiculous coincidence or a clear, greater kind of power and purpose. So it's always really encouraging to me to hear these God moments in people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Listening to it again now, I'm realizing this is the same guy who tried to run away from all his problems.
Right.
This is the same guy who wanted to be independent his entire life and never, and just wanted to solve his problems on his own, you know? But here is a situation that you just can't do anything. Like, what can you do? Surgeon's not picking up the phone call. We don't know if the tumor is going through or around his nerves. There's so many things that are outside of your control, but God just steps in, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in that moment, it's so easy to think like, wow, I just got so lucky.
Yeah.
You know, everything just worked out so perfectly. But, you know, I think we all know.
Yeah.
Right. What really happened. And it's pretty amazing, I think. Even just listening to it again, it's pretty wild.
And it's so simple. Just like the spin class friend says, come here. Oh, okay. Oh, there's kids. Oh, I know that person, so I'm comfortable. I'll stay. Oh, let's just cry. And maybe since I'm sad, I'll share what I feel. And then, oh, wait, okay, then, you know, it's like, I think even as I was listening, I was like, I couldn't wait for this like redemption part because I was like, dang, they've been through so much, you know, but it's like so simple too. It's like, it doesn't have to be this, you know, and even in the simplicity of events, like you can sit here and as believers be like, man, God is so good.
Yeah.
And the power of that is the same, whether it was a sequential events type of thing or the, oh my gosh, I saw an angel on the road type of thing, right? Like in the end, it's like, God is still so good.
Yeah.
And happy for Ethan and them too. No, Aaron.
Ethan. Yeah.
Okay.
His firstborn. Yeah.
Oh, it was Ethan. Oh, this was all, okay.
This is all Ethan. Yeah. 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 And so this next portion of his story, so they've been going to house church for a while now. And during these next few months that we talked about in his life, he just talked about how he just ended up giving up more and more of his life to do community and church, right? And this is, he doesn't really know what's going on right now at this point, right? We have the benefit of hindsight, but Nathan's kind of just doing his thing. This is like, he's experiencing something good. He's experiencing fellowship at church. He's getting to experience what it looks like to serve meals at church. People are asking him to like help clean up around church, and they're asking him to give up bike riding on Sunday, and he does it, and he like experiences more and more. And that's where we pick up in the story now.
And so finally they were like, hey, you know, you should go to RJM.
Which stands for?
Receiving Jesus Meeting.
Yeah.
And that's where they explain the gospel. Yeah. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And Irene didn't know what it was. And I was actually like, you know, I've been baptized, right? So I don't need to go to that. And they're like, you should go support your wife. And I was like, yeah, I'll go support my wife. Yeah, sure. I should sit next to her. You're right. And of course, Irene's like, what is this? What is this? I was like, I don't know. How the heck should I know? He's going to talk about Jesus. What's wrong with that? You know, Jesus. So we get in there, and, you know, this is back when I think they allowed your house church members to come and sit with you. So, you know, I got like Don Chang and Joe Yu sitting in the back. They had to sit on the ground because there's so many people in RJM that day. It's like 20 people. And, you know, Pastor just starts asking everybody very pointed questions. You know, the first one's like, are you going to heaven or hell? You've been in it. Yeah. And, you know, I think the first few people just couldn't answer, but some people, I'm definitely going to heaven. Oh, I'm going to hell. And then, you know, he looked at me. I was like, you know, it's just not that simple. You know, my answer, you know,
very typical Nathan answer.
Yeah, like, you know, it's just not that simple, P. You know, like, you know, there's more to it. It's not black and white. And he was like, yeah, it is. And I was like, what? And like, yeah, he just schooled me like he does once a month, right? Once a month. He must love that feeling. he must love that feeling to just reveal the truth. Yeah. Yeah. And so he just revealed it to me. He was like, you know, either either you accept Christ and you're going to heaven or you're not. And I was just like, oh, then as of right now, I guess I'm going to hell. And I just couldn't help just crying. And just the Holy Spirit just came over me. That's all I could call it. Because back then I didn't understand what it was.
Yeah.
And I just, all I could say was like, I'm just being led. I am being led to say yes. And that's it.
Yeah.
I don't know what is leading me. You know, PE, you're cute, but no, I don't think it's you, dude.
Yeah.
You know? And yeah, I accepted Christ that day for the first time. And so did my wife. And I think, after that, the Holy Spirit just kind of kept growing.
Yeah.
I think this is a good reminder for me. Just even like classes like RJM, which, you know, we've been talking about that too. Like, it's formality, like sometimes, you know, for believers, but even like feeling like not like a rebuking of myself right now, but even in those chances, like to pray for people who like, this is that moment for them where they're truly accepting Christ for the first time. And that's like incredibly special. And yeah, just like grateful that he had that place to, you know, the house church members, like, yeah, just go support your wife, like meet them where they are, like play into the whatever identity they have. But really it's like, no, you're about to get rocked yourself, you know? And then hearing, I don't know any of those people personally, but like Don, Chang, and Joe, you are the house church members, I guess. So that's like kind of like powerhouse people that we're aware of as like newbies to New Life. So that's pretty cool. Yeah,
I think that moment where when he was saying, it's really not that simple. That is such a Nathan thing to say. But I was just struck by like, yeah, it is. I guess it is that simple. And I think just his honesty in being, and I think recognizing that, yeah, he is baptized. He knows what church is, but he recognizes in that moment, oh, I am going to hell. You know, I don't have that relationship with Jesus. And I think that was a powerful moment to listen to.
Yeah.
All right. And he, at the end, this last part, I just had a chance to kind of just ask him some questions about how he feels about all this now, right? Looking back on it. What would you say is the biggest difference in your life now, before you met Christ and after?
I mean, it's probably a tie between two things.
Yeah.
I think I'd say the biggest difference for me, the biggest difference is in my marriage. I think that, you know, we always harbored so much resentment towards each other. And there was always a lot of bitterness. Even some of the most happy moments in our life, there was still just some dark resentment. And I think all of that we're starting to reconcile. But I think that God has really started to open my eyes to how very, very important my wife is. What being yoked really should look like. Like it was even just today, she reminded me when I was just feeling down and I was just feeling a bit helpless. Even then, she reminded me and encouraged me and just got me to sort of shift another 2 degrees back to have my focus on Christ. And that, I think, is just invaluable to have that in your spouse and to rely on them in that way, to know that she's always going to be there to lift me up, but in a way that brings me back to my Savior. Like, at the end of the day, when you give your life to Christ, you actually start to realize that you have to be saved every day. And I think that she is probably the most important person on earth that fulfills that role in my life. And so that, I think, is that's the biggest change, is that I see her as somebody that I have to depend on.
You said there were 2.
Yeah. I think the second is being able to forgive myself. I think that the reason that I felt so bitter was that I was so very ashamed of all the things that I did. I didn't think that I was worthy. Even after getting baptized, there's still so much in our hearts and so much history that we have without Christ that has to be reconciled. You know, and I think that sort of refinement is happening. He is taking away these burdens and allowing forgiveness in places that I wouldn't allow myself to be forgiven. In places that I was convinced that I was bad and convinced that I was unworthy. And I think that the identity that he's given me now has just lifted all of that away, or is lifting it all away. It's a process.
Yeah. I think that hits home for me because I think that's something I've been reflecting and learning a lot about too recently. I think you are sometimes your biggest judge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you reflect and you know exactly what you were thinking when you did this. You know exactly how you were feeling when you did this. And I think there are a lot of moments when you think about yourself like, man, like if I knew someone else was doing that, I would never forgive that person, you know? And I think it's just wild to think that there's someone that knows exactly what you did. Like, cause like God knows exactly what you did and how you felt about it, you know, and he still forgives and loves anyway, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's just been blowing my mind a lot recently. Just on a weekly basis.
Yeah. It's just I am just so incredibly undeserving, but it's wrong of me to think that way.
Yeah. It's
wrong of me to not acknowledge how deserving I am because he loves me.
Yeah.
So that, it's been really nice to wake up and to just like think about that.
Wow.
Yeah. That is Nathan Chang. I think that last part that he was talking about, and like you guys, I've shared this with you guys too, but that listening to him share that, it was like, wow, that's exactly what I've been thinking this last month. And realizing, yeah, I can forgive myself for all the like stuff that I've done. Not because there's anything that I can do to earn that forgiveness, you know, but God chooses to forgive and Christ died because to give me that forgiveness, you know? And I think for him to share that at the very end, I was like, wow, like that was just a huge, I don't even know what the right words are to say there, you know?
Yeah. Man, I feel like the Spirit was with you guys, even just in this conversation and how the story was shared. And, you know, even as you fill in the blanks too, since this is a podcast, right? But yeah, I think even just Nathan sharing and reminding us like every day you have to be saved over and over again. And I think that really hit for me because I don't know where along these past few years, but I stopped going to the cross every day, you know? And I think that's just something that then you become your worst critic, right? Because if you're not constantly reminding yourself of the grace that is greater than us on earth, like you point fingers at yourself, I point fingers at my spouse, you know, then I create the bitterness that, you know, that they talked about in marriage, you know, that we also struggle with. And a lot of couples do struggle with and can struggle with, which is why there are so many divorces in this world. And so I think it's just so important, like as he shares the victory of marriage reconciled because of their testimony together. Like, I don't know, I just found really excitement in that, and really just convicting myself to hopefully be the spin class friend, or the one that just like exudes a light. Because that's really all we can do, right? Like be little people in his grand plan, because this story is such a grand story, right? And then all these, it's not even like it was just somebody did something, right? It's just all these little people. And so I think that's something I want to reconvict myself to move by his spirit, which seems hard in this COVID world, right? And I think that's why it's especially important for us to reflect on that this Palm Sunday, this Easter week, right? Like, how can we truly remember the cross and the importance of that message over the fears of this world and the things that we think could impede? Oh, there's no spin class right now. I don't know, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
It's such an impactful story. I'm really grateful for him sharing and just the vulnerability.
Yeah.
And just kind of going into all the nitty gritty details of his testimony. Just a lot of powerful reminders. I think one of the most amazing attributes that I've always seen in God, and that to me is one of the things that draws me into him more than anything, is the idea that like even someone's sin, God makes sure that it doesn't go to waste. Like he uses it. He doesn't want us to sin, but when we do, he's not willing to let the sin happen without a purpose in the life of a believer. And that idea is always crazy to me, because like that's how big he is, that even the thing that separates us from him, he's not willing to let it go without using it for our gain. And I mean, in this case, just hearing the ways that now, because of what he experienced and because of what Nathan did growing up, how it's shaped him to be like a leader in his family and a father. And even how the sin of the people in his life maybe occurred, shaped very specifically, his saving grace, and even him now having a testimony of someone who fell into sin and fell into all the craziness that he did in those high school and college years, and allowing him to share and impact who knows how many people who are struggling with the same thing, and that can now see what life can look like with God, when you're able to conquer those things. I think it could allow Nathan to be grateful for the things he's been through, even though they're so painful, because of the eternal impact that they've had on him and they can have on other people. To me, that's always blown my mind. It's been one of the characteristics of God that's always drawn me in the most. And it's super evident in this whole testimony. It's really cool.
Yeah. I think one of the, like you were saying, one of the wildest things for me now, listening back to this all the way through, because I've heard this story now a lot of times. I can probably recite the story back to you. But hearing it from beginning to end, and even just filling in the blanks for the parts that we weren't able to talk about, like, you could just see God moving in so many different places and touching his life along the way without even him realizing, And I didn't really get to see that until now. And it's just, it's wild. So I'm really thankful, I think, to be able to hear his story, and like Nathan's, I don't know if I could be that vulnerable, knowing that this podcast is going out and being shared, but
and
so
should
thankful.
be shared, because this is a great story.
Exactly. And so I'm just really grateful. Nathan, if you're listening, thank you. Irene, thank you for letting us listen to your story.
When Nathan was talking about Irene at the end, I just pictured her face with a heart around it. And I was like, oh, full circle.
Yeah. And there's so much more to Nathan's story that I wasn't able to share with you all, but he's such a warm and welcoming guy. Yeah. So.
I think that's what testimonies are for, right? Even when you want to share your testimony, sometimes you feel like you have to share every detail, but people, like God is relational, right? And these stories show his grace and his power, but also invites you to have relationship with brothers and sisters in community. I'm not saying everyone that's listening, like go and bombard him, go slide into his DMs and, but like, share these stories and share even your experiences during this time. And just give God the glory. I think even one more thing that Nathan said was, like having to forgive yourself for all the things that you did, right? And I think something, I don't know why, but I wanted to also share in case this was for somebody else as well, as I feel like lately in these last few years, I have to sit down and almost forgive myself for rebuking or for feeling shame of not doing. I don't know. And feeling like in that not doing, I've really disappointed him. And even remembering that that's not the type of God that God is to expect those things. So hopefully whatever reflections you have and whatever story you have, this week, you can just really remember what a loving God he is.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for listening and staying with us this long. Thank you again to Nathan and all the folks in his life who've guided him and mentored him and now, married him even. But yeah.
We're not going to do it today.
Why not?
Well, you know what? I think in this entire episode, what I really, really appreciate is together, you two, men, son of God, right? You really helped us enjoy the one.
Oh, that's where she's going.
I think
Oh man, are you talking about who are you? Which two men are you, me and Matt?
no, you and Nathan talking.
Okay.
It really allowed Matt and I to enjoy the wonder.
All right, thanks, y'all.
All right.